My fiancée decided to take a break from our relationship to travel around Europe with her college friends, so I canceled the wedding. Here's the story. Sarah and I had been together for 5 years and engaged for nearly 3. Everything seemed fine, or at least I thought so. We had a wedding date set, plans finalized, and I assumed we were on the same page. Apparently, I was wrong. About 6 weeks ago, she told me she was planning a trip to Europe with her old college friends. She described it as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity or something along those lines. I didn't object. I wasn't about to stop her from going on a trip with her friends. In fact, I even drove her to the airport, helped her with her luggage, kissed her goodbye, and wished her an amazing time. That's when she blindsided me. While we were walking toward the security line, she casually dropped a bombshell. "We need to take a break." She didn't suggest sitting down to discuss it or anything. She just threw it out there like it was no big deal. I remember standing there, stunned, thinking, "What do you mean, a break?" Before I could even respond or ask questions, she was already waving goodbye and heading through security. I couldn't fully process what had just happened. I drove home assuming it was some offhand comment made out of nervousness about the trip. But when I tried calling her later to check in, I discovered I'd been completely blocked. No calls, no texts, nothing. I checked her social media to see if she had posted updates about her trip, but I was blocked there too. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a random remark. She genuinely meant it. She'd left for Europe and cut off all communication without discussing it. I decided to give her a few days to calm down, thinking she might realize how unreasonable she was being. But after 5 days of total silence, I was done. I made up my mind right then and there the wedding was off, and honestly, I felt relieved. Why should I stay with someone who thinks they can just walk away whenever they feel like it? I wasn't going to sit around waiting for her to decide she wanted to be in a relationship again. So I took action. I canceled everything. The venue, the catering, the flowers, every last wedding plan. I also decided she wasn't moving in with me, which had been planned for March. Nope. She could sort out a living situation when she got back from her little vacation, because she wasn't staying with me. Weeks passed with no word from her, not a single call or message. Then, out of nowhere, she called me one day. I didn't even realize it was her at first, because she must have used a different number. She casually told me she'd be arriving Thursday morning and even gave me her flight details, acting like nothing had happened, as if she hadn't ghosted me for 6 weeks. I paused for a moment and then replied, "What's that got to do with me?" The silence on her end was priceless. She didn't know what to say. I didn't let her explain either. I simply blocked her the same way she had blocked me. That was the end of it, or so I thought. Later that day, I decided it was time to let everyone know what was going on, especially since the wedding was off. We had a group chat with friends and family, so I posted a quick message, "Hey, just letting everyone know the wedding is canceled, and so is our relationship." I didn't expect the response it got. People immediately started asking what had happened, so I explained everything. How Sarah left for Europe, announced we needed a break without discussing it, and then blocked me for 6 weeks. Everyone was stunned. Some people were genuinely angry on my behalf, which honestly was a nice change. You never really know how others will react when you share news like this, so it felt good to have support. Around 2 p.m., Sarah finally decided to respond. At first, she didn't say much, just asked me to call her so we could discuss everything. I wasn't interested. I told her we could talk right in the group chat if she wanted to explain herself. She wasn't happy with that, claiming it was a private matter and not something for everyone to see. But no, she made it public the moment she walked out of my life without any explanation. She kept sending me messages, but I kept my replies short. I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses. By 6 p.m., she was begging me to come to the airport to pick her up so we could sort things out. Seriously? As if none of this had happened, I told her straight up that was your plan, not mine. None of this was part of my plan, and I wasn't going to play the fool by rushing to the airport after all she'd done. Honestly, part of me was still hoping she'd provide some kind of explanation that would make everything make sense. I guess I wanted to believe there was a reason, something to justify her behavior. But as the hours went on, I realized there wasn't going to be one. There wouldn't be some grand apology or revelation of a misunderstanding. She'd made her choice, and over the next few days, I focused on rebuilding my life. I wasn't about to let this situation drag me down. I started sorting through our shared accounts, making sure everything was split. And yes, I changed the locks on my apartment. The last thing I needed was her showing up unannounced, thinking she could just walk back into my life. I was done. I even began planning trips of my own. If she could take off to Europe for 6 weeks, why couldn't I take some time for myself? I deserved it after all the nonsense she'd put me through. So that's where things stand now. She'll be back in a couple of days, but I won't be waiting for her. She can figure out her own way home. As far as I'm concerned, this chapter of my life is closed, and I'm ready to move on to something better. Now, let me tell you what happened next, because things escalated quickly. After accepting that the wedding was off, I figured it was only a matter of time before Sarah tried reaching out again. I was prepared for that. What I didn't expect was how fast she'd try to play the victim. It started with a message from Emily, one of our mutual friends. Emily's great. She's always been honest with me. But this time she seemed hesitant, like she didn't want to get involved. She sent me a screenshot from another group chat, one I wasn't part of, obviously. The screenshot showed Sarah talking to her friends, spinning the story to make herself look like the victim. In the chat, Sarah claimed she'd been overwhelmed by the wedding planning and needed space to clear her head. She even said, "I didn't mean for the break to last that long, but I thought he'd understand." And then came the kicker. I just needed to figure out if I was ready for marriage, but he canceled everything before I could talk to him. I couldn't help but laugh when I read that. She blocked me on every platform for 6 weeks and then acted like I didn't give her a chance to explain. That's not how this works. Reading those messages made my blood boil. She was playing the poor me card, trying to make it seem like I overreacted and rushed into canceling the wedding. At that point, I knew I couldn't let her keep spreading this false narrative and making me look like the bad guy. I decided to address it directly. Jumping into our main group chat, the one where friends and family were still reacting to the wedding cancellation, I laid everything out. People were already speculating, trying to make sense of what was happening, so I figured it was time to clear the air. I posted, "Look, I just want everyone to know the truth. Sarah decided we were taking a break without discussing it with me, blocked me for 6 weeks, and now she's acting like this is some kind of misunderstanding. I canceled the wedding because I wasn't going to wait around for someone who didn't respect me enough to have a conversation." Immediately, people started responding, offering their support and expressing how messed up the situation was. Sarah stayed quiet in the group chat for about an hour after my message, but eventually chimed in with a weak excuse. She said she hadn't expected things to go this far and claimed she never meant to hurt anyone. Once again, there was no real accountability, no genuine apology. It was just an attempt to salvage her image. One of my friends, Jake, stepped in and called her out in front of everyone. He said, "Sarah, you can't just decide to take a break, vanish for weeks, and expect everything to be okay when you come back. That's not how relationships work." Honestly, I was relieved Jake said it because by then I was tired of defending myself. Things took an interesting turn when Sarah's friend Megan, who I'd always thought was a bit shady, jumped in to defend her. Megan claimed that Sarah had been under a lot of stress and that the pressure of planning a wedding could mess with anyone's head. She tried to spin it like Sarah was a victim of anxiety, which, sure, I get it. Planning a wedding can be tough. But that's no excuse to block your fiancé and disappear for 6 weeks while living it up in Europe. Megan kept pushing the narrative, saying I should have given Sarah more time to process everything and that I acted too hastily by canceling the wedding. That was my breaking point. I wasn't about to let someone who wasn't even in the relationship tell me how to handle things. I responded, Megan, with all due respect, you don't know the full story. This isn't about wedding stress. It's about the fact that Sarah completely cut me off, blocked me, and didn't reach out to me once during her entire trip. I tried to call and text her and got nothing. How much more time was I supposed to give her? Another 6 weeks? A year? If Sarah didn't want to be with me, she could have just said that. Instead, she disappeared and expected me to wait around for her. That's not how it works. The chat went silent after that. I think people were starting to see how messed up the situation really was. Even Megan didn't have much to say after that. A couple of days later, I thought things might finally settle down, but I was wrong. I got a call from Sarah's sister, Rachel. Rachel and I had always gotten along pretty well, so I assumed she might be calling to check in. Instead, as soon as I answered, she launched into, "Why did you cancel the wedding without talking to Sarah first?" I was shocked. I didn't expect Rachel to side with Sarah after everything I'd told her. I replied, "Rachel, your sister blocked me. How was I supposed to talk to her when she completely cut me off?" Rachel didn't have a good answer for that, but still tried to push the idea that I should have waited until Sarah returned so we could talk things through. At that point, I was done. I told her, "Look, I understand you want to defend your sister, but what she did was wrong. She didn't give me any say in the whole break thing, and I'm not going to wait around for someone who doesn't respect me. If Sarah wants to explain herself, she knows how to reach me, but I'm not going to fix this." Rachel tried to continue, but I cut her off, saying I had to go, and hung up. I wasn't about to keep having the same argument with every person Sarah sent my way. That night, I got another message from Sarah. This time, she was apologizing. Sort of. She said she was sorry for how things played out, but didn't take responsibility for her actions. It was one of those half-hearted apologies that tried to make it seem like we were both to blame. I didn't respond. There was no point. She'd made her choices, and now she had to deal with the consequences. I blocked her again to ensure there wouldn't be any more drama. I wasn't interested in listening to her excuses or letting her drag this out any longer. In the end, I realized something important. I dodged a bullet. If this was how Sarah acted when things got tough, I couldn't imagine what it would have been like to be married to her. While I regretted the time we'd wasted, I was relieved it ended before things got worse. I decided to move forward and focus on better things. Update 1. After dealing with Sarah's guilt-tripping and attempts to make me reconsider the wedding, which didn't work, I thought things would finally calm down. Of course, that didn't happen. About a week after I'd blocked Sarah for good, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer because, by then, I wasn't in the mood for more drama. But for some reason, I picked up, and guess who it was? Sarah's mom. Now, Sarah's mom, Lisa, was always one of those people who acted super sweet on the surface but had a passive-aggressive undertone you couldn't ignore. She'd give you a compliment, but it would somehow feel like an insult. You know the type. Anyway, Lisa started the conversation all cheerful, as if nothing had happened. "Hi, sweetheart, how are you doing?" she asked, like we hadn't just canceled a wedding and I hadn't blocked her daughter. I wasn't about to play along, so I kept my responses short. I deeply apologize for cutting down details in the previous response. I'll rewrite the text again, ensuring every detail is retained and no information is omitted or shortened beyond the timecode removal. Thank you for your patience, and I'll handle this with the utmost care moving forward. I'm fine, Lisa. What's this about? That's when she started the guilt trip. Oh, we were so excited for the wedding, and this entire situation has just devastated Sarah. Did you know she's been crying every single day since she came back? She's been a complete wreck. I wasn't about to let her make me feel guilty for Sarah, not after everything she had pulled. I replied directly, Lisa, I'm sorry that Sarah's upset, but she made her choices. I didn't cancel the wedding for no reason. Then Lisa came back with, well, don't you think you might have overreacted a little? Sarah was just nervous about everything, and stress can make people do things they don't mean. Don't you think she deserves another chance? I couldn't believe it. She was acting as if Sarah blocking me for 6 weeks and vanishing was just a small mistake. I told her firmly, Lisa, this wasn't nerves. She blocked me on everything and went to Europe without a word. If she was having doubts, she should have talked to me instead of shutting me out. But Lisa still wasn't finished. I know it seems bad, but think about all the years you've been together. You've had such a strong relationship. Don't you want to at least try to save it? I'm sure once Sarah explains everything, you'll understand. At this point, I was getting frustrated. It was like she wasn't even hearing me, completely ignoring how I felt and only focused on convincing me to take Sarah back. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, and said, Lisa, with all due respect, Sarah had 6 weeks to contact me, and she didn't. I've made my decision, the wedding is off, and that's final. I thought that would end the conversation, but Lisa wasn't done. Well, if you won't talk to Sarah, at least come over for dinner so we can talk as a family. Maybe we can work through this together. I was shocked. She was acting like this was just a minor argument that could be solved over dinner. I realized this wasn't going anywhere, so I told her, thanks for the offer, but I think it's best if we all just move on, and ended the call. You'd think that would have been the end of it, right? Wrong. The next day, I got a message from Sarah's dad, Tom. Now, Tom is one of those traditional types who always thinks he's right. He never really liked me, but he tolerated me because I was with Sarah. So when I saw his message, I knew it wouldn't be a pleasant conversation. He basically tore into me, saying I was throwing away a great relationship and ruining Sarah's life by not giving her a chance to explain. He even said, real men don't act like this. You should stand by your fiancée, not run at the first sign of trouble. Oh, that comment really set me off. I had stood by Sarah for years, and this was how I was being treated? I decided not to reply, because I knew it would only lead to a pointless argument, and honestly, I was done with it. But the worst part came a few days later. I got another message from Sarah. This time, she used a different number to contact me, and the message was long, several paragraphs. She wrote about how sorry she was for everything, how she didn't mean to hurt me, and how she realized she had made a mistake. She said she had made a mistake. She said she had been confused about the wedding and didn't know how to tell me, so she panicked and blocked me. Then she dropped the biggest bombshell. She still wanted to get married. Yeah, after all of this, blocking me, ghosting me for 6 weeks, and blaming it all on stress, she still thought we could go ahead and get married. It was like she was living in some fantasy where a simple apology could undo everything. I stared at the message for a while, not sure how to respond. Most of me was still angry, but a small part of me felt sad. We'd been together for years, and this wasn't how I thought it would end. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't something I could forgive. It wasn't just about the wedding or her trip to Europe. It was about trust. Sarah had broken that trust, and no amount of apologies or explanations could repair it. So, I did what I should have done from the beginning. I blocked her number, deleted the message, and moved on for real this time. After that, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't tied down by Sarah's guilt trips or her family's constant pressure anymore. I could finally focus on myself and what I wanted for the future. And honestly, it felt great. Update 2. You'd think that after I blocked Sarah and her family again, things would finally calm down. Nope, that would have been too easy. It's like they just couldn't accept that the wedding was off and kept trying to wear me down. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. A few days after Sarah's last attempt to reach out, I got another text, this time from one of Sarah's bridesmaids, Katie. Now, Katie and I weren't close. She was always polite in group settings, but she was more Sarah's friend than mine. So when I saw her name pop up, I was immediately suspicious. The text started off harmless. She asked how I was doing and said she'd heard about the breakup. But I wasn't naive. I knew she wasn't just checking in. I kept my response short. I'm fine, just taking things one day at a time. Then she hit me with it. I think you should hear Sarah out. Here we go again. I stared at my phone, debating if I should even bother replying. Part of me wanted to just block Katie too, but I was curious, so I replied, "Why do you think that?" Katie launched into a long message about how Sarah had been struggling and crying every day since she got back. She claimed Sarah was too scared to contact me directly because she thought I wouldn't listen. Apparently, Sarah had been telling her friends she knew she'd messed up but didn't know how to fix it. I sighed, already feeling my frustration build. Katie, I've heard all this before. I gave Sarah chances to explain and she didn't. She blocked me for 6 weeks and then expected everything to be fine when she got back. That's not something I can just forget. Katie tried again, saying Sarah needed space and didn't mean to hurt me. But the more she talked, the more obvious it became Sarah had sent Katie to do her dirty work. Thinking she could persuade me by having someone else talk to me, it was clear Sarah didn't even have the courage to face me herself anymore. I was done. I told Katie, "Look, I appreciate you trying to help, but this isn't something that can be fixed with a few apologies. It's over." And that's final. I could tell she wanted to push the issue further, but I didn't give her the chance. I blocked her immediately. Just when I thought I might finally be in the clear, another message came through, this time from one of Sarah's cousins, Mark. I hadn't spoken to Mark in months, and now, out of nowhere, he was texting me, asking if we could meet up to talk about everything. By this point, I was so exhausted from all the attempts to drag me back into Sarah's drama that I almost didn't reply. But curiosity got the better of me, and I wanted to see what Mark had to say, so I agreed to meet him for coffee. When I arrived at the cafe, Mark was already there, looking a bit uneasy. After some awkward small talk, he finally got to the point. "Look, man, I know this situation with Sarah has been a total mess. I just wanted to check in and see if there's any way you two could work things out." I almost laughed and replied, "Mark, it's done. There's nothing left to work out. She made her choices, and I made mine." He shifted in his seat, visibly uncomfortable, and said, "Yeah, I get that, but here's the thing. Sarah's been saying she thinks she made a mistake. She's been hinting that maybe, with some time, you two could give it another shot." I set my coffee down, trying to keep my frustration in check. "Mark, no offense. But Sarah already had her chance. It's fine if she made a mistake, but this wasn't just a small error. She ghosted me for weeks, completely cut me off, and acted like I didn't even exist. That's not something you can just move past. He nodded, but it was clear he wasn't really processing what I was saying. Yeah, but what if she's serious about wanting to fix things? She's been talking about how much she wants to make it up to you. Shaking my head, I replied, Mark, I appreciate you coming here and trying to help, but it's not going to happen. If Sarah wants to move on, that's fine, but I'm not interested in going back to where we were. We sat in awkward silence for a moment, both realizing the conversation was going nowhere. Eventually, Mark shrugged and said, I get it. I just thought I'd give it a shot. I finished my coffee, stood up and said, Thanks for trying, man, but it's over. It's time for both of us to move on. He gave me a half-hearted smile, and we said our goodbyes. Oh, for a moment I thought that might be the end of it. After all, how many people could Sarah possibly send after me? But of course, I was wrong. The very next day, I got a message from Sarah's aunt, someone I barely even knew. We had met at a couple of family events, exchanged polite conversation, and that was about it. Seeing her name pop up on my phone, I knew things had reached a new level of ridiculous with Sarah's family. Her aunt started by saying she'd heard about the breakup and wanted to check in to see how I was doing. By this point, I was so fed up that I just asked her outright, Did Sarah send you? Her response was, Well, not exactly, but she's been struggling and I thought I could help mediate things between you two. I almost threw my phone across the room. Mediation? I texted back. There's nothing to mediate. We're done. I don't know how much clearer I can make it. Sorry, dear. Still, she persisted. She said something about how love is worth fighting for, and how I shouldn't throw away years of a good relationship over what she called a misunderstanding. That's when it hit me. Sarah had probably been feeding her family some sob story, making herself look like the victim and painting me as the one who overreacted. This time, I didn't even bother replying. I blocked her aunt and decided I was done. No more conversations, no more explanations, no more chances for anyone to drag me back into that toxic mess. I was officially finished. After that, things finally began to settle down. No more texts, no more calls, no more random family members appearing in my inbox to guilt me into taking Sarah back. For the first time in a while, I felt like I could breathe again, free from the weight of her drama. And honestly, it felt incredible. There was no more waiting for hollow apologies, no more dwelling on what could have been, just me focusing on my future and what I wanted for myself. Update 3. So here's how everything finally wrapped up, and no, it didn't end quietly. You'd think that after blocking Sarah, her mom, her bridesmaids, and most of her family, things would finally die down. But of course, that wasn't the case. Sarah decided to make one last move, and it showed me just how far she was willing to go to try and win me back, or at least get her way. About a month after everything had gone down, I received a letter in the mail. Yes, an actual handwritten letter, like it was the 1800s or something. At first, I almost didn't open it because, honestly, who even sends letters anymore? But the handwriting looked familiar, and I figured, why not? Maybe it was Sarah's final attempt to reach out, though I wasn't expecting anything too dramatic. Boy, was I wrong. I opened the letter and found a multi-page handwritten message from Sarah. She poured her heart out, saying how much she missed me, how deeply she regretted everything, and all the usual nonsense. But here's the kicker. She didn't just apologize. She mentioned that she still had the key to my apartment. Yes, the same key I had completely forgotten she even had. My stomach dropped. I'd already changed the locks once when this all started, but it hadn't even crossed my mind that Sarah might still believe she had access to my place. I immediately got up, checked the locks again, and started thinking about my next steps. But that wasn't all. The letter wasn't just a long-winded apology. She laid out a detailed plan for how we could start fresh. She claimed to have been talking to her mom and said we should go to couples counseling. She had even already booked appointments for us without even asking me. The sheer audacity of it blew my mind. After everything, blocking me, ghosting me, sending her family and friends to guilt-trip me, she still thought she could control the situation and get me to go along with her plans. By the time I finished reading, I was more furious than anything. It was clear she hadn't learned a thing. It seemed like she believed that if she meticulously planned everything, I would eventually cave in, so I decided to respond in the same old-fashioned way, writing her a letter. I figured if she wanted to go the traditional route with handwritten notes, I'd play along one final time. But this time, I made my stance crystal clear. I told her in no uncertain terms that it was over. There would be no counseling, no second chances, and no meeting the talk therapist. I also instructed her to return the key to my apartment, even though I had already changed the locks again, and told her she needed to move on because I certainly had. After sending the letter, I felt good, like I had finally closed that chapter for good. I really thought this was the end of it, but, of course, I was wrong. A week later, another letter arrived from her. This one was much shorter than the first. She didn't try to argue with me or convince me to go to counseling again. Instead, she said she understood my perspective but still thought we needed to talk. Then she mentioned something that sent a chill down my spine. She admitted to driving by my apartment a few times and noticing that I wasn't home. She didn't explain why she was doing it or what her intentions were, but the idea of her checking up on me like that was unsettling. At that point, I knew I had to take stronger action. I wasn't going to let this spiral into something that resembled stalking. I contacted my landlord to discuss adding extra security measures to my apartment, including possibly installing cameras. I was done playing around and needed to ensure my safety. And just when I thought things couldn't get any stranger, my mom called. Now, my mom had been incredibly supportive throughout all of this, understanding everything I'd been dealing with. But this time, she called to tell me something that nearly made me drop my phone. Sarah had shown up at her house. Completely unannounced, she went to my mom's home, asking to talk about us. I was furious. Not only was Sarah crossing boundaries with me, but now she was dragging my family into her mess, trying to manipulate them to influence me. Thankfully, my mom didn't fall for it. She stood her ground and told Sarah that I had already made my decision and she needed to respect it. Apparently, Sarah got emotional and started crying, but my mom didn't waver. She firmly told Sarah that it was time to let go and move on. After hearing about this from my mom, I realized I needed to take one final decisive step to put an end to this situation for good. I filed for a restraining order. It wasn't a step I wanted to take, but I felt like I had no other choice. Sarah was overstepping boundaries, and I needed to protect both my personal space and my family from further intrusion. When Sarah was served with the restraining order paperwork, she finally backed off. There were no more letters, no more surprise visits, nothing. It seemed like she had finally understood that I was serious. While I didn't feel good about having to take things that far, I knew it was the right decision. Looking back, I learned a lot from this entire ordeal. I learned that it's crucial to stand firm in your boundaries, even when others refuse to respect them. I realized that you don't owe anyone unlimited chances, especially after they've betrayed your trust. Most importantly, I understood that moving on isn't just about leaving a person behind. It's about reclaiming your peace and safeguarding your future. So that's it. That's how it all came to an end. I'm finally free from all the drama and focusing on moving forward with my life. It wasn't an easy journey, but I made it through, and now I'm putting my energy into what lies ahead. No more looking back.